Transition's basically a way for communities to localise. Localising basically means providing for more of their own needs. Pretty much everything that we need is done by other people, probably quite often very far away. So localising is saying, well, actually, it would be better for the planet and also actually for us as a community and as individuals if we did more of that kind of stuff for ourselves. But also I think there's a realisation that localisation is helpful to communities in lots of other ways as well. So it can address poverty in communities, it can address unemployment because we want to create local jobs.
So having the gatherings and having the annual gathering and themed gatherings and regional gatherings is a great way for people to feel that they're part of the bigger picture and the action's happening and things are moving forward and sustainability is becoming something much more commonplace and achievable.
I'm Svenja and I'm based in Cooper in Fife and in the moment researching communities and climate change. It's really important to be aware that when addressing the problems of climate change and peak oil, to make sure that nobody is left behind, that the solutions that we find don't marginalise the people who've been marginalised in the first place, but to really try and create a socially just transition. That's especially important in an urban context where you get in Glasgow, in some areas, the life expectancy is lower than in Iraq.
The group that I'm being involved in with Friends Earth is developed by people being passionate about the environmental movement sort of thing, and by getting to know each other a bit more, we've realised that we're interested in where our food comes from, about our energy, and I think the transition movement is something which also incorporates a lot of these sort of themes. So although we're coming from an environmental starting point, that whole life, that community element of it is something that's became more important to us. And as we've tried to take the message out into communities, we realise that you can't just be preaching to people. People need to believe it and experience it, and that's where we're at the moment of looking, is there a project that we could take forward that could maybe fit into the transition sort of a model? I suppose what transition means to me is that we are facing a couple of uncertainties, whether that's the energy or whether that's climate change. And I think what transition starts the process of people thinking of what skills do we need to take that forward. And I think in any community there is skills already there. So the starting point, I suppose, is looking at not what is the problem, but what is some of the solutions to that problem. And if the problem is energy, then the solutions will match that. If it's climate change, the same solution will match that as well. And if none of them become a problem in the next generation, then people have still learned skills and there's a sense of community. So there's nothing to lose through transition.
My name's Abby Morden. I work as a project coordinator for Urban Roots. We work in an area called Sorry Glen, which is only 2,500 households, so it's not a very big area. But it is an area of multiple deprivation. We have food projects, we have energy projects, we work with all sorts of people in the community. The issues that some of the people that we work with sort of are up against are time issues to do with trying to generate their own income, looking after their own sort of financial security, fuel poverty. There's a lack of education and awareness of sort of global issues, and we have the problem of sort of trying to sort of put what we're doing into a sort of global context, but still make it relevant for the people that we're working with. I don't know really, how do you get enough people on board in a short space of time, and the urban context is probably the most difficult context to sort of deal with that in.
I'm Vicky Ferguson from a knitting group in Stirling, and also part of the Towards Transition Stirling. And we were running a workshop, a kind of woolly skills workshop, and that was about giving people a chance to have a go at knitting, crocheting, and we had some examples of stuff they could do, how it relates to the kind of transition movement. Our knitting group it kind of ties in with the transition, and everybody involved with that is kind of coming with an environmental kind of background as well. So when we knit in the pub, and when we're knitting, we're kind of talking environment, transition, music, all sorts of different things. So it's much wider than just knitting. Getting the community taking a bit more ownership of what's happening and thinking about local foods, farmers markets, kind of the transport network. So I think it's quite an exciting time, and you look at an event like we've had over the weekend and see the amount of interest that's being generated and what potential's there across the country.
So tonight I was doing an introduction to permaculture. So the people that were there didn't really know about permaculture. And so it was great just to have that opportunity. What's challenging is, things like, how can you empower people? How can you involve people? Transition Scotland is a coming together of the people that are most active within those smaller communities and share information, share stories, watch how things are facilitated, learn how things are facilitated and take that back to their own communities.
I'm here because I'm really interested in how transition initiatives can work together to try and impact on the political level. So I've got a slightly different agenda to most other people here probably, and I'm just concerned that we can't really make the change in the time needed unless we're not only working on the ground but also having an impact on the next level up. Well, the most challenging thing is the thing I'm really focused on, which is how do we affect the politicians? How do we get the politicians to take the really brave step of saying the problem is not climate change or peak oil or any of these things. The problem is a system of economic growth that requires taking in as much resources as possible and spewing out as much waste as possible. And the more you do that, the better off you're supposed to be according to the system. To have a politician actually stand up, or politicians stand up and say, no, we're not going to play this game anymore, would be incredibly brave of them. And trying to work out how to provide them with the support and the encouragement. So taking a transition approach to politics. How do we not shout at them, but not just go along with them or placate them? How do we actually really challenge them straightforwardly in a friendly, supportive way to say, you need to change and we're here to support you? We did that in Parliament in September. We had a big meeting of lots of transition folk and other folk from different communities taking action on climate change in Parliament. It was packed out. I had about a dozen MSPs and ministers there, and we were basically presenting 4 policies to them, saying, would you please take these on? These are what we need to be able to make the transition as a whole country.
Well, my name is Annie Flint, and I'm here because I just started a new business which is called giftedpeople.co.uk. But that business came out of my experience with running the West Glasgow Local Exchange Trading Scheme. So people asked me to come along today, and I've been doing a workshop on local exchange trading schemes and local currencies. Transition for me is something I've always lived, and I just want to try and communicate that there's another way of doing things. It doesn't always have to be cash that you do things for. You don't always have to go down this conventional channel that people have built for you. You can create your own way of doing things.
I work part-time for Transition Network, which is kind of the umbrella organisation, if you like, of transition. And what I do with the rest of my time is facilitate the Transition Tales project in Totnes. We've developed a game. It's called The Quest to 2030. It's a community building game. The game was developed initially for children, but then when we ended up playing it with adults and discovered it worked just as well with them. It doesn't really matter how old you are. And yeah, outcomes are similar in that very, very often people come out with the story of a transition future. They're sharing things and they're excited about sharing things, they get really creative. And interesting, when you have more generations playing it, the quality of the story and the richness of the solutions for the challenges is fantastic.
My name's Rachel Nunn, and I'm the Programme Manager and founder of Going Carbon Neutral Sterling. The key about changing somebody from one set of attitudes to another set of attitudes is about understanding where they come in from. And I think all of us who are concerned about climate change have this tendency to run off about our concerns, to tell people what they have to give up and what change they must make. And we're not very good at actually just starting a conversation and listening to how people feel about things.
I think an event like this is really useful to bring obviously all these projects together, different initiatives, different community groups that are either have the idea to start a transition initiative or are already doing it, and it's great for the sort of skill sharing and networking that provides. So I think Transition Support Scotland plays a really powerful and important role in enabling that to happen.
I think it's absolutely wonderful that people are coming together and getting to know each other face to face and making those personal connections that are really like the glue of a community.
What you get at events like this is the whole scale and the whole spectrum of what the transition possibilities are, rather than here's the one way of doing it. And that means when you go back to your community, you may be speaking to somebody about food, and there's lots of examples. You may be speaking to people about craft or health, and there's just examples of how that might add up to something a lot bigger rather than just being isolated interests.
I think transition gatherings are incredibly positive. And yeah, I've already heard some stories here this evening that I'm just sort of ticking away there thinking, gosh, how can I put all those things together? And just wondering about how many stories each of the people that are here have got.
These kinds of engagements are really, really important, and transition is very much leading the way in Scotland and across the UK. So it's very exciting and quite an honour to be here.
What's special for me about transition is that it's got such a broad scope. It's really looking at the whole community. What can our whole community do, and how can we reinvest as individuals and as a community in this place that we live in? And how can we draw our resources locally and in a sustainable way, so that the way that we live isn't having such a hugely negative impact on other people across the world and also on the planet.
With Copenhagen coming up, there's going to be a big kind of moment where the decision of whether current political power systems are able to tackle the crisis will show in the kinds of decisions that are being made in these international meetings. And if nothing comes out of that, then we just need to do it ourselves. We need to really organize in a critical mass on a grassroots level and really do it from the bottom up.